everybody, welcome to the show. Round the Nation right here. Round the Nation with Jeff Waldorf here. Wow, that's a great start to the new year. Holy crap. Okay, guys. Again, welcome to the show. We got a great show for you guys today. A lot of important stories here, including a NBC reporter lashing out at pro-war media. Oh, you're going to love that story. My favorite story of the day. We also have Mitt Romney, Kellyanne Conway, the shutdown, and one of the fun stories, of course, is Fox and Friends, right? Fox and Friends guest thinks that more fossil fuels is actually better for the environment. Okay. Well, that's an interesting take. We'll look at that, and then we'll kind of break that down. We'll see if that's true, and if they maybe have a little bit of a point. Fascinating. So we got a great show for you guys today. Like I said, we're going to talk about those things. But first, I want to say Happy New Year to everybody. First show of 2019. So yesterday, so I'm still getting over this whatever the hell I had over the holidays. So yesterday was not the best day for that. Again, I'm still like getting over it. So I'm still like, I feel like I'm nasally, but maybe I'm just naturally nasally because maybe I always sound like this. But anyway, we're back for the rest of the week. Show comes back as normal. So that's good. It's great to be back. So what we're doing here is a couple of goals for 2019, obviously to get to 100,000 subscribers. So that was our goal for 2018. We didn't quite make it, but we are about 1,400 subscribers away from hitting 100,000. So we are super, super close. And within the next few days, we should be able to hopefully, or I should say maybe the next few weeks, be able to pass that. So at the end of the month, we'll have 100,000 subscribers, and that'll be fantastic. Then we also have another goal. Right now we are doing a fundraiser. I know it seems like shows like ours are always doing fundraisers. That's because we don't get very much money. So I don't know if you know that. So this other fundraiser is for equipment. So we're actually raising $1,500 to get a new camera, which, you know, I'll be using obviously to film things. Like, for example, political events. So I'm going to go around the state during primary season, and we're going to film political events, maybe set up some interviews with some local politicians, and all that stuff. So I want to do that. We're raising that money. We're at $275. I want to give a big shout out to Julia, who donated $50, Shane, who donated $25, Mimi, who donated $150. That's awesome. You're amazing. Rick, who donated $20, Corey, who donated $5, and Josh, who donated $25. Those are our donors so far. If you want to help out, of course, the URL is, let me find that for you. It's gofundme.com/TYTNationCamera. So that's what we're primarily raising money for, is to get an expensive professional grade camera. So if you want to donate, you can go with that. Also, Super Chat. I've got one to read before I get into the show. Actually, they didn't actually send a message, but thank you, Ronnie Lama Richardson, for the Super Chat. That's another way that you can help the show. And of course, thanks to everybody who donates to us on Patreon. So much of that stuff to go through. But now let's get into the news. But before I do, you guys are just amazing. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's going to help us a lot. All right. Anyway, let's go in here. Let's see. Let's go here to the stories here. All right. We'll start out with the first story, Trump's shutdown. Now, with President Trump's shutdown nearing its second week, pressure has mounted on him to end the shutdown over funding for his border wall. Remember, That's the entire reason that he's doing this government shutdown. Or so he would like you to think. Oh, I got to get the border wall. I got to get the wall. Well, it turns out the one thing stopping him from shutting down this disastrous, interesting phrasing there, stopping this disastrous shutdown, getting the government back into business, is apparently his ego. Now, Trump reportedly told a group of lawmakers that he can't accept Democrats' offer to reopen the government because he would look dumb and foolish if he did. This is according to a person familiar with the exchange. Now, more directly here, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer had said he asked Trump why the government couldn't be reopened while the two sides worked to resolve their differences. And where they differ on is, not funding for the military, which Democrats have been more than willing to pump more and more money into the military-industrial complex. That is an issue that I've called out Democrats on before. But they just don't want to allocate $5 billion towards that wall in exchange for opening the government. Now, there's, of course, good policy reasons for that, and I'll explain that later. But first, let me go to the quote here. Schumer said, I asked him directly, and he could not give a good answer. Shocker. Wow. Least shocking revelation. Now, after Democrats explained their plan to pass measures funding the government, including the Department of Homeland Security, at least temporarily as negotiations continued, Schumer repeatedly asked Trump why he opposed that approach. The person familiar with the exchange had said. Eventually, Schumer asked for a third time for one reason Trump wouldn't accept the offer, and he responded, quote, I would look foolish if I did that. So, there you go. No actual good reason to let over 800,000 federal workers, some working paycheck to paycheck, get back to work, except for Trump's very fragile ego. Can I mention Snowflake? Now, the saddest thing is this isn't even about policy per se, right? It's not about a wall, as I'm going to tell you later. No, this is about feelings. I mean, again, he went from concrete wall, right? So it was originally asking, oh, I want a concrete wall. And he's like, oh, I want steel slats. And it kind of looks like a wall. No. See, here's the thing. This has never been about border security. This is nothing more than a $20 billion to $70 billion vanity project for Donald Trump. Well, that's what this is about. And when you think about the kind of person Donald Trump is, it makes all the sense in the world. He's more than happy to spend other people's money on things that inflate his own ego. I mean, again, all you have to do is just look at the now defunct charity, the Trump Foundation, where he used other people's money to buy pictures of himself and an autographed helmet from Tim Tebow, right? But still, you have some Republicans out there that still think this is about border security, which it's not. As part of the meeting, according to CNN, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen sought to portray the situation at the southern border as a crisis, according to two senior administration officials. Now, Nielsen said, this is not a status quo situation. We are in a crisis situation. This is according to one of the officials relaying Nielsen's remarks, which are aimed at the Democratic leaders, Chuck and Nancy. She said, status quo funding is not enough. That's a crisis, man. Really? What's the crisis here? What's the crisis? Is it the caravans? Again, the caravans stopped being news as soon as the midterms were over. And most of it had already kind of splintered apart. A lot of the people ended up staying in Mexico. A lot of the migrants and a lot of them, or some of them have come and exercised their right to claim and apply for asylum. So, okay, what's the real crisis on the border? And there actually is, by the way. Well, first, there's a humanitarian crisis with, migrants, of course, being denied water. And two migrants, actually asylum seekers, actually dying in custody. So that would be a crisis. Another crisis would be the fact that our immigration system as a whole is broken. Now, we have right now a gigantic backlog where it takes 20 to 30 years for someone who is applying for citizenship to actually get citizenship. So that's a big problem, right? So now we could solve that not by building a wall, but by getting more immigration judges and officials so that we can help process claims. So, we can hire more judges and put them to work on those cases, right? That would actually help out a lot. A wall would help out not at all. So what he does is that he wants kind of a wall, but actually steel slats and maybe like a border fence, which, by the way, that was Hillary Clinton's position, was a border fence. So also that he doesn't look foolish in negotiations with Democrats. Surprisingly, this is why the Democrats have held strong, because the politics are actually in their favor. Donald Trump, policy-wise, is backed in, right? And, of course, optics-wise, he's also backed in. Now, look, Schumer and Pelosi, you got to remember, they don't actually act on principle. Okay? What they do is they act on politics. And if it's beneficial politically for them to stay strong and not give in and not cave, well, then they'll hold all day long. But, of course, when their donors come calling, that's when they decide to make a deal, right? So the donors haven't come calling yet, but I think the longer that this shutdown continues and the more that this starts to affect the economy, then I think they'll have more of that pressure. But for right now, the politics are incredibly favorable to the Democrats and very, very unfavorable to President Trump. So understand, it's not because they have the strength of the courage of their convictions. No, but again, nonetheless, we can be happy that at least that they've held out on this position. Because honestly, this is a no-win scenario for Republicans and Trump. Again, Republicans don't even really want this wall, right? Republican politicians. And so what this is that this is his own Kobayashi Maru. You can't win this one. Give it up already. And let's let these federal workers, many of whom are struggling paycheck to paycheck, get back to work already. Okay. Now, are they going to do that? Of course not. And then we're going to go to Kellyanne Conway. I know a lot of you guys are asking for Democrats' Medicare for All. We can do something on that tomorrow. And especially after PayGo. So I'm really waiting to see where the PayGo situation, that legislation, like what happens with that. So just be patient, guys. We'll report on that too. All right. But anyway, let's continue. All right. So Kellyanne Conway no longer believes that the president owns the shutdown, which means that certainly the president has decided that he no longer wants to own the shutdown. Now, she made this statement while speaking to reporters at the White House, according to CBS correspondent Mark Knoller. Now, he tweeted out, he doesn't own the shutdown any longer, says White House advisor Kellyanne Conway, President Trump. She says Pelosi ignored an interrupted border security briefing at White House yesterday and was, quote, rude and dismissive of border officials. Now, I want to show you a video of her statement, and then we'll break this down. Take a look.
You can say wall all you want. You can make it a four-letter word. Nancy Pelosi can ignore. Yesterday, they just ignored and interrupted and was frankly just very rude and dismissive of our Secretary of Homeland Security, our Director of Customs and Border Patrol, our Director of Immigrations and Custom Enforcement. If we're going to talk about bipartisanship and a democracy, a Washington that works, you just can't ignore the facts and the figures that somebody are trying to present to you that's coming from your own government. So that was really poor form, but the president has graciously invited them back here tomorrow, and hopefully they'll come recognizing that border security is not a partisan issue. It's a nonpartisan issue, striving for bipartisan solutions.
I love that. I love how she talks about facts. Hey, Kellyanne, remember, you're the one who came up with alternative facts. I'm just saying. Now you want to talk about, how they're ignoring facts. Well, what facts? But no, the problem here is, from her perspective, is The Democrats are just so rude. I mean, they just don't respect the president and they don't respect decorum. Okay, so now this is fun because it turns out that this might also be a lie. See, let me quote one of the sources that was supposedly in the room per CNN. Apparently, during this so rude, meeting, right, where the president was interrupted by Pelosi and Schumer, this source said, quote, "There were no raised voices during the meeting." Oh, well, okay, well, look, you don't have to be loud or anything like that to be uncivil, to be rude. Okay, just because they weren't yelling doesn't mean they weren't rude. Okay, well, let's go then to Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, who is the Senate Majority Leader, he said on these talks, quote, "I don't think any particular progress was made today in the talks, but we talked about all aspects of it, and it was a civil discussion." So sources in the room say, oh, they weren't yelling. And Mitch McConnell says it was a calm but civil discussion, even though we didn't agree. We didn't come to an agreement on policy. And that means that Kellyanne, wait, I thought this was so incredibly rude. No, man, when is Kellyanne Conway ever going to get tired of lying? Again, she just does it without any shame. Just shamelessly lying every time she talks to me. She can't help herself. A lot like President Trump. Even her own husband blasts Trump on Twitter. And she's going to sit there and lie for him. It's really kind of sad and pathetic. And to the substance of this, Trump doesn't own the shutdown. Well, we can go back to the video where he said, oh no, I totally and completely own the shutdown. I'll be proud to own the shutdown. Oh, but now that it's inconvenient, and now that it's basically been proven that it's nothing more than an ego thing, that it's a vanity project, well, now he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to own it. It's typical Trump wanting to pass the buck onto someone else. It's not my fault, it's the Democrats' fault. Why don't they just give me what I want so that I can win, and then this can be over? But if they do that, look, what's to prevent Trump from doing the same thing the next time or anytime he wants something ridiculous? That's why the Democrats can't fold at this point. And you don't think that he would do it? No, of course he would. He's a child. So that's who Donald Trump is, and that's why Democrats cannot cave on this issue. Okay. So we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to go after the pro-war media. I love this story. This is a veteran reporter that is going after one of the news agencies that he worked for decades. And like I said, you're going to love some of these quotes here in this story. So come back after the break. Super chats. We'll check the GoFundMe campaign right after we come back from this break. So stay right here, around the nation. Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here. Jeff Waldorf with you. So I just want to, I was looking for some updates on PayGo, and I come across this article, actually from The Intercept and Pace Magazine. So Ilhan Omar, who's a progressive that was just recently elected, she apparently is in favor of, not of the PayGo rule, but of signing, of course, the package into law that contains the PayGo rule. I want to give you the quote here. And again, this is really, it's disappointing. So, and let me show you why, or give you at least her quote on that. Let's see. Okay. Here we go. She said, "I'm pleased that the rules package will include important reforms I helped negotiate, including the elimination of the supermajority vote requirement, which would limit our ability to raise revenue necessary to fund important priorities like healthcare, education, and green jobs, as well as the clarification that religious headdresses can't be worn or can be worn in the House chamber." She said, "I continue to have concerns about the inclusion of pay-as-you-go or PayGo, but I'm pleased that Chairman McGovern and House leadership have assured us the rule will not be used to block key progressive priorities in Congress. Budgets are an expression of our values. Going forward, I support legislation to reform PayGo, and I'm committed to pursuing reforms that allow us to center our politics on people's everyday needs rather than artificial constraints. I want to thank Progressive Caucus co-chairs Mark Pocan and Pramila Jayapal for their leadership on this issue." So, look, again, that is Ilhan Omar, and I am deeply, deeply disappointed in that statement. Are you really going to listen to the establishment when they say, "Oh, no, we promise we're not going to use PayGo to block you"? Are you serious? And these are people that take millions of dollars from the health insurance industry that will now have a rule if this passes, and it hasn't yet. But to me, it's looking more likely to kneecap progressive policies. Now, look, let's be fair, right? So there already is a PayGo law on the books. It was passed in 2010 under Nancy Pelosi. So again, she championed that. So that's a more federal rule, right? Which again says that you have to, if for anything that could add to the deficit, you have to either raise revenue or cut spending. So we already have that in place. So the rule in the House is something that, yes, you could theoretically get by, but there's a law in the books. But my situation here, or my question on this is, okay, we already have a law, so why is she trying to do this in the House? It doesn't make any sense, because again, this is a Republican-led austerity movement. And what we should be doing, actually, if they actually do, believe in not tying our hands, is that we should all be going after the federal law. All the Democrats should be going, "Oh no, we're not in favor of PayGo. Let's go after the federal legislation on PayGo." So again, it doesn't make much sense to me why they even are bringing this rule to the House. But seeing all these progressives support it is, again, disappointing. Ilhan Omar, very disappointing. Progressives are going to remember, especially if this basically stops any legislation in the House. So, from even being considered. I just don't understand the idea. And the whole idea behind PayGo, not only, the PayGo law, but also the PayGo rule that is being discussed in the House, why you would even have such a thing if it wasn't meant to basically stop any sort of progressive priorities. So this is, again, deeply frustrating. And then another frustrating development is, of course, Pramila Jayapal. So Jayapal also, is voting for the package, but she said, quote, "Even taking PayGo out of the rules package does not address the real problem, which is that it's a statutory requirement and needs legislation to take it out of statute." So then why vote for a package that has it included? Why not just say, okay, we're not going to vote for this. We'll vote for all the other stuff, like the Gephardt rule, which is actually a good thing. There's actually some really good things in that piece of, in that House rules package. So why not just take PayGo out and then vote this rule package in and then say, now let's go and try to get rid of that federal PayGo law. Would be great if we could do that. But unfortunately, they're not doing that because here's the thing. Pocan and Jayapal, they're going to introduce a law to repeal PayGo at the federal level. The thing is, it's never going to pass. And it would require a lot of Republicans to help them pass it, right? To get rid of that. It's got no chance. Whereas to stop the PayGo rule in the House, you only need 18 Democrats. Why can we not unite around getting rid of the PayGo rule and then unite to get rid of the PayGo law? I don't understand. But either way, this is kneecapping progressive priorities. And again, it is deeply frustrating. So, deeply frustrating. But anyway, so that's sort of your update here on that. And I'm going to go watching that situation closely because it is important to me. Policy matters a lot. But anyway, now, before I get into the show, we're going to do a Mitt Romney story first. Then we're going to go to the NBC reporter. But first, Super Chats. Well donated $25 for the camera fund. Thank you, L. Andrew Pollard said, Happy New Year. Here's to a successful 2018. Into an even more successful 2018. To 100K well-deserved subscribers and more to come. And to you for being a brilliant progressive independent media. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew, I really appreciate that. You guys are awesome. So thank you so much. All right. So, let's see. Let's go into that Mitt Romney story real quick and then call out the pro-war media. All right. Okay, hold on here. Michael McAllister, before I get into that, says Pocan was saying that if they vote against the package without the rule, they will forfeit power to Republican senators and Trump. I don't see how that's the case. Because, look, you already have the federal law. If you want to stand up against Trump and Republican senators, you challenge the federal rule. So, I don't know. It just, again, it doesn't make sense. Maybe I'm missing something here. But anyway, now let's go to Mitt Romney real quick. Okay. Hold. All right. Nope, that's the wrong one. All right. So, corporate media want you to believe that Mitt Romney is a profile in courage, since he recently came out with an op-ed that attacked President Trump's character. He said, to a great degree, presidency shapes the public character of the nation. A president should unite us and inspire us to follow our better angels. A president should demonstrate the essential qualities of honesty and integrity and elevate the national discourse with comedy and mutual respect. As a nation, we have been blessed with presidents who have called on the greatness of the American spirit. With a nation so divided, resentful, and angry, presidential leadership and qualities of character is indispensable. And it is in this province where the incumbent shortfall has been most glaring. Oh, the president just doesn't have the character to be president. Fascinating. Can I just mention that this is a guy who wants to be president so bad? He has just never quite gotten over losing to Obama in 2012. He's like, I gotta be president. I gotta be president, man. I just have to. Okay. Now he wrote, it is not that all the president's policies have been misguided. And so this is where in the op-ed, he basically says, I don't agree with Trump on how he acts, but I definitely agree with him on his policies. Now, which policies, of course? Well, there's deregulation, which he has done a great job of. He has deregulated a lot of industry, especially coal and the banks. Not only that, but he's, of course, cut taxes for the rich. And the newest one, interestingly enough, he also supports Trump's border wall. He said, he told Jay Tapper on Wednesday that, quote, I would vote for the border wall. We should have a wall on the southern border. So basically, hey guys, I'm against Trump, but I'm in favor of basically everything that he does. Bold. This is your maverick. And by the way, MSNBC did a segment, which is again laughable because MSNBC, they're like, oh, the new incoming mavericks, one of them is Mitt Romney because he says bad things against Trump. So now you're, what? He's the resistance hero now? I hate this. It's just like Jeff Flake, for example, right? Jeff Flake, Bob Corker, they both said bad things and negative things against Trump, and they voted with him on policy. And of course, Mitt Romney has shown that he is absolutely no different. It's pathetic. Romney's admitting that, hey man, I like all these terrible, sometimes racist policies, like, for example, the border wall. We just don't like the fact that Trump's so honest about them. He's not showing comedy. He's not showing decorum. And he also added that while the Trump's government shutdown is unfortunate, he, of course, was unable to criticize it. So that's interesting. Again, he gets into office and he kind of lightly tweaks Trump a little bit on the fact that he tweets and says some negative things and says, oh, I'm going to hold him accountable, while, of course, voting for everything that Donald Trump does. So congratulations on literally standing for nothing, Mitt Romney. But again, what do you expect from someone who is basically an empty suit, Mr. 47%? Sit the fuck down, Romney. Okay. That's fairly clear. All right. A former veteran NBC reporter has issued a scathing resignation letter going after the media and especially his former employer for being on the side of endless war. Now, the letter published in full by CNN on Wednesday by the longtime news reporter William Bill Arkin, who, by the way, was not only a reporter, but he was also a commentator and a military analyst for the channel, went after the corporate media for their embrace of endless war, and of course about the military-industrial complex that drives that reporting. Now, I want to give you some excerpts from this resignation letter. Now, in one passage he wrote that, quote, long before Trump and the deep state became an expression, I produced one ginormous investigation, Top Secret America, for the Washington Post, and I wrote a nasty book, American Coup, about the creeping fascism of Homeland Security. Now, again, a lot of that is pre-Trump, and we can see from the Obama administration and the Bush administration that these presidents basically expanded Homeland Security. They expanded the military-industrial complex. They expanded spying into American citizens. And no one in the media, at least no one in corporate media, would ever stand up to them. In fact, they would continue to go along with the narrative of, no, what we need this stuff to be safe. So don't worry, listen to your government overlords, and they will keep you safe as long as you continue to funnel money into the military and support everything that they do. Now, he continues in this op-ed by saying, in this resignation letter, that looking back now, they were both harbingers for what President Obama and then Trump faced in terms of largely failing to make any sort of enduring change. Now, you guys remember Hope and Change. Look, Obama ran on Hope and Change. He ran on closing Guantanamo. He ran on drawing down the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Didn't happen. We continued the wars in the Middle East. And we continued a lot of the bombings and expanded bombings in Africa and places like Syria. And so our military involvement continues all over the globe. There was no change. And look, there was not a lot of change from President Trump so far as well. But there are some, of course, exceptions. But we'll get into that. Now, here's the thing. On Syria, as I just mentioned. Now, defense contractors want to stay in Syria. Of course, they want us to continue bombing operations in Syria. They want us to continue just in Syria, keeping those 5,000 troops. And so, basically keeping us involved in that conflict. Now, to give Trump some credit, he does want to leave. But he continues to be surrounded by people who are in the military-industrial complex, in the military establishment, that are wanting, oh, you better not do that. You better not leave. And so, of course, they've gotten him to change his timetable just a little bit. Now, to which, of course, his desire to leave Syria altogether has gotten him incredible pushback, especially from corporate media outlets like NBC. Now, on that, Arkin writes, quote, I find it disheartening that we do not report the failures of the generals and national security leaders. I find it shocking that we essentially condone continued American bumbling in the Middle East and now Africa through our ho-hum reporting. Again, direct shot at the media for not calling out military leaders. And that's because the military itself is deeply pro-war. Just imagine if you were to come out against a general that did something wrong. Immediately you would be called un-American. Why don't you support the troops? You got to support the troops no matter what they do. You got to support the troops. You got to support the generals. You have to support the American military machine, or else you are un-American and you want us to be overrun with terrorists. That's usually what they say. So, and of course, the media also says that, hey, we need to not go after these people. And while they're saying that, they also give them positions as policy analysts on their news stations. And that's really important. Now, Arkin continues, he says, it was clear to me that NBC, like the rest of the news media, could no longer keep up with the world. Added to that was the intellectual challenge of how to report our new kind of wars, where there are no real fronts and no actual measures of success. Now, that's absolutely right. There are no measures of success. Again, what happened to Mission Accomplished in Iraq? We had to literally get booted out of Iraq by the Iraqi government. And then, of course, we ended up going back in, to do counterterrorism and to fight, ISIS, which our intervention created in the first place. So, in reality, there is no exit. Because once you go in and you mess a place up, you can continually make the justification for coming back. Oh, look, we got to go back now because look at what happened. Look, we got ISIS now. We're going to have to deal with that. Then we're going to have to deal with Al-Qaeda, and we're going to have to deal with this and this and that. It's never ending. Now, he continues. He says, to me, there's also a larger problem along with those. Though they produce nothing that resembles actual safety and security, the national security leaders and generals we have allowed to do their thing unmolested. Despite being at war, no great wartime leaders or visionaries are emerging. There's not a soul in Washington who can say that they have won or stopped any conflict. And though there might be the beloved perfumed princes in the form of the Petraeus and Wes Clarks, or the so-called warrior monks like Mattis and McMaster, we've had more than a generation of national security leaders who sadly and fraudulently have done little of consequences. You know why? Because winning wars doesn't make money. Ending conflict or preventing conflict doesn't make defense contractors money. And it also doesn't make the media money. Now, Arkin continues, he says, and yet, despite those failings, we and others embrace them, even the highly partisan formers who masquerade as analysts. We do so ignoring the empirical truth of what they have wrought. There is not one country in the Middle East that is safer today than it was 18 years ago. Indeed, the world becomes ever more polarized and dangerous. Damn. So, again, harsh critique, but absolutely on point. And again, coming from somebody who was an insider at NBC. Now, look, he was an insider, but that doesn't necessarily mean he always agreed. In fact, behind the scenes, he was always fighting with NBC. But we'll get to that. First, he said, quote, as perpetual wars become accepted as a given in our lives, I'm proud to say that I've never deviated my argument at NBC or at my newspaper gigs that terrorists will never be defeated until we better understand why they are driven to fighting. And I have maintained my central view that air power, in its broadest sense, including space and cyber, is not just the future, but the enabler and the tool of war today. So that's a note, right, to everyone who believes, or anyone who believes, oh no, it's not war, we're just doing airstrikes. No. Airstrikes are a form of warfare. They kill people just as well, probably actually a lot better than a soldier on foot. Not to mention drones also are considered air warfare. And they're incredibly effective at killing people, especially innocent people, as we have shown with our drone signature strikes. And the fact that if you look, a lot of our airstrikes have killed multitudes, scores of innocent people. So keep that in mind, right? Now, as I said, he goes into being a difficult guy, right? According to his colleagues or according to himself, speaking self-deprecatingly, of course. But what's interesting about that is how he views himself as that way because of his anti-war stances. So somehow being anti-war is actually really difficult as a member of corporate media. But here's the thing. He's been right on a lot of issues. And I'm going to go through some of those. For example, Iraq, right? He was one of the few that said, no, I don't believe that there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We're not going to find any. We haven't found any. He doesn't have any. So we have launched a war, or planning to launch a war into Iraq that will be absolutely useless and worthless and cost American lives and taxpayer money. I am not in favor of that. In fact, he quote, remembers fondly presenting that conclusion to an incredulous NBC editorial boards. So he's trying to say, he was saying to NBC, dude, we should not go into Iraq. There's no weapons of mass destruction. There's no proof of that. Or why are we going to cheerlead for a war that was caused under false pretenses? Again, weapons of mass destruction. That's the whole supposed reason we went into Iraq in the first place. There were no weapons of mass destruction. We were the weapon of mass destruction. The United States. Look at what happened in Iraq after we invaded. Yes, Saddam was a strong man. Doesn't matter. Right? We went in. We wrecked everything. We created ISIS. They didn't attack us on 9/11. And it was actually people from Saudi Arabia. 15 of the 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. They had nothing to do with the attack on the United States. So, but again, the NBC's position was, oh no, the government tells us there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Therefore, there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We must report that as the absolute truth because the government would never, ever lie to us about War. Right. See how that turned out. Now, he also said that while he argued endlessly with MSNBC about all things national security for years, while also poking at the conventional wisdom of everyone from Matthews to Hockenberry, he feels as if he failed to convey this larger truth about the hopelessness of our way of doing things, and is especially disheartened to watch NBC and much of the rest of the news media somehow become a defender of Washington and the system. He also noted that NBC, after Trump's election, began emulating the national security state itself. Busy and profitable, no wars won, but the ball is kept in play. And as I mentioned, that ball is very lucrative. Now, he also says that under Trump, the national security establishment has gained dangerous strength. He says, quote, now it is ever more autonomous and practically impervious to criticism. He also argues that NBC has become somewhat lost in its own verve, proxies of boring moderation and conventional wisdom, defender of the government against Trump, cheerleader for open and subtle threat-mongering, in love with procedure and protocol over all else, including results. And summarizing his disagreements with the pro-war positions commonly used by the network under the Trump administration, Arkin says, quote, for me, I realized how out of step I was when I looked at Trump's various bumbling intuitions. His desire to improve relations with Russia, to denuclearize North Korea, to get out of the Middle East, to question where we are fighting in Africa, even in his attacks on the intelligence community and the FBI. Now that's interesting. So he is basically going to, yes, defend some of Trump's positions. And I absolutely think that he is correct. Now, let me read that for you. He said, of course, he is an ignorant and incompetent imposter. And yet I'm alarmed at how quick NBC is to mechanically argue the contrary, to be in favor of policies that just spell more conflict and more war. Really? We shouldn't get out of Syria? We shouldn't go for the bold move of denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula? Even on Russia, though we should be concerned about the brittleness of our democracy that is so vulnerable to manipulation, do we really yearn for the Cold War? And don't even get me started with the FBI. What? We now lionize this historically destructive institution. Damn, dude. Again, over and over, the hits keep coming, and he is absolutely correct on all of this stuff. And again, he's not the only one who has seen this going on. I've been in favor of these ideas, right? Pulling out of Syria, getting out of the Middle East. We need to get out of these wars. They're ridiculous. Making peace, denuclearizing North Korea. And look, I was in favor of the Korea talks with Kim Jong-un. What's sad is that Trump, again, the administration is so incompetent that they couldn't actually get a real deal together. And that was my hope, is that they could actually get a real deal together and that North Korea would denuclearize. But unfortunately, again, it didn't happen. At least not at this point. I still have hope that we can, right? And now the interesting part that he points out is that even if Trump were to do that, and that would be amazing, and I'm in favor of that diplomacy, if you were to get North Korea to actually denuclearize, the default position for NBC and a lot of the corporate media would be to criticize Donald Trump for doing so. Because the media is against Trump. And so he is absolutely right when he says that the media is 100% against him. Unless Trump has a pro-war position. And of course, we can go back to Brian Williams, who when Trump was launching this attack against Syrian air bases, these 52 missiles, he said, well, that was the day that Trump became presidential. So if you were in favor of war, then the media will heap praise and they will laud you for it. But if you were in favor of peace, if you're in favor of ending these conflicts, then the media would automatically be 100% against you. It is a sad situation. A very sad situation. Again, here's the thing. I mentioned before where there were articles when Trump announced that he would be pulling out of Syria. Again, a policy that I agree with. That there were articles out there that were slamming him for doing so. Right? Now, that proves, again, anything that's against endless war, they're going to automatically oppose. And that is a big problem because the media is supposed to be objective, right? They're supposed to be objective. They're supposed to tell you the truth. They're not supposed to take a side or be against something because, oh, well, obviously the president that we don't like happens to be against that. So, or happens to be for a position, so we automatically have to be against it so we can oppose. That's ridiculous. That's not being objective. And you're not doing your job, especially if you're cheerleading for endless conflicts. So, and that's the problem that we have, is we have a media complex that right now is going hand in hand with the military. They are promoting militarism. They're promoting imperialism, all while doing stenography for the government. They're not holding the powers that be accountable for their actions, which is why I think we need a media revolution. We need a media that is not corporate media. We need independent media that will report on this. Now, this guy, again, worked for NBC. He's a veteran reporter, and he's always been kind of a thorn in the side of NBC, and even through his protestations and his work, he has not been able to get through because that entire industry is controlled by the money. We have to get a media institution that is divorced from corporate money, from defense contractor money, from oil money. Again, you turn on CNN, what do you see? You end up seeing ads for fossil fuels, for natural gas, and things like that. And that's why, again, we need that independent media that is free from that so that they can actually report objective reality instead of pro-corporate, pro-war propaganda. Okay. All right. Let's do one more segment here. Try to make it quick. We're probably going to go over. So if you guys want to leave for TYT, you can do that if you want. But we're going to try not to go over as much as possible. Okay. All right. Now, a recent report out from the Trump administration has basically warned that unless we go 100% carbon neutral and then find some way to reduce the carbon that's already in the atmosphere, then we as a species are in real trouble. Now, despite that dire warning, Fox and Friends is going to continue with its absurd climate denial in the form of the following segment. Now, this segment takes a tweet from Bernie Sanders and basically puts a climate denier in the seat and asks his opinion on his stance about climate change. Now, that segment features Brian Kilmeade talking to a man named Mark Morano. You can't make that up. That is a real name. Now, he founded the conservative news website climatedepot.com. Now, you're not going to be surprised that that website is funded by fossil fuel interests and disputes the scientific consensus on fossil fuels contributing to climate change. So, again, you're not going to be surprised to his response to Bernie Sanders' tweet that I am going to show you right now. Let's take a look.
Bernie Sanders says this. He's hardly a Gen Xer. He says we must look at climate change as if it were a devastating military attack against the United States and the entire planet, and we must respond accordingly. What does he plan on doing?
You know, this is silly. We're gonna treat now carbon dioxide, a trace essential gas, with humans inhale oxygen, we exhale CO2, as somehow akin to the Nazi Party and a World War II initiative, which is what they're claiming. They want a mobilization like World War II. Here's the bottom line: this has nothing to do with fighting an enemy.
Oh, you're calling carbon Nazis? How dare you? Oh, you guys are so ridiculous. No. What he means by that tweet is that we need to treat this, since we're all about military interventionism, why don't we treat climate change as if it's a threat to the United States? Which, that's a position that the military itself, the Pentagon itself, holds. And they say that it is going to cost the United States billions of dollars. It's also going to cost us an economic activity and reducing our GDP, right? So that's what they're saying, right? Now, if all you care about is economics, okay, then that can make a good, convincing argument. I actually care more about economics. I actually care about the health and safety of people and the planet. But anyway, now, here's the thing. Is he right about fighting an enemy? No, he's not. But here's the thing. In order to fight an enemy, or in this case, in order to fight climate change, you would need resources, right? Now, instead of planes and guns and tanks, we need solar panels, some R&D, of course, more efficient energy storage systems like solar batteries, windmills, geothermal plants, maybe carbon capture and sequestration technology, an increase in that, something, right? At least in the interim, before we go to 100% renewable energy. You know what that means? You know what all that technology means? A transformation of our energy system. You know what that means? Jobs. It means jobs. But I guess Mark Morano is against jobs. Not a smart position, right? Especially when a Green New Deal, which will create millions of great, well-paying American jobs, is incredibly popular with the American public, even popular among Republicans. But now what's his position, right? Mark Morano's position is, let's ignore this problem as if it doesn't exist and allow oil and gas companies to continue to burn fossil fuels. He is seriously against doing anything. And I want you to check out his absurd reasoning for not wanting to do anything. Let's take a look.
How do you feel about people like Senator Barrasso proposing incentives for people to capture carbon as opposed to penalties and punishment?
Well, there's all kinds of proposals. Everyone's for energy efficiency, for a clean environment. Oddly, the more carbon-based fuels you can introduce in the developing world, Africa, South America, Asia, the cleaner the environment gets. You have less people burning dung in their huts. You have less people dumping sewage into the rivers because you get infrastructure. So carbon-based fuels actually improve the environment. And beyond that, everyone wants efficiency, but you don't ban energy that works and mandate energy that's nowhere near ready for prime time, all this so-called renewable. And that's what they're going after here.
Gotcha.
I love this argument. All right. So, and the reason I love it is because this is the one time a right-winger actually cares about people in the third world, people who are brown and black primarily. Look, oh yeah, I care about those people. I want them to have coal because it's better than burning dung in their huts. Okay, look, again, that's a bit, I don't know. I want to say disrespectful, but no, I don't even think that's the correct word for it, right? But it's ridiculous. So here's the thing, right? Now, is there a little bit of a point where for the people who do still do that, and that does happen in some developing countries, is there a problem with that? Yes, burning wood or burning dung, as he says, does create some problems with local pollution. Right? And so should we do something about that? Yeah. Is the correct way to solve that problem to give them coal, which is marginally better? No. Now, the correct way to do that is to give them access to solar panels, solar technology. Solar technology, by the way, is in its prime time. Or how about wind energy, right? How about build some wind turbines? That's prime time. And guess what? It's actually cheaper than coal, right? And it's 100% clean and renewable energy. You solve two problems at once. You solve the particulate matter problem, which is caused by, again, burning wood or burning dung in these poorer areas, and also create innovation, right? Create jobs in those areas, and you do so without adding carbon emissions to the atmosphere. It's actually really good, right? And look, the idea that solar and wind power aren't ready to be used, they're not in the prime time. That's kind of absurd because right now they are valid forms of energy. And while, of course, there could always be more efficient, and we could always come up with better iterations of that technology, solar power has actually gotten incredibly efficient over the last decade, and so much so that these alternative energies that he's talking about, again, if he was saying this 10 years ago, then he would be right, that they're not ready for prime time, that they're not ready in the mainstream. But so far, a lot of European countries that are seeking to phase out fossil fuels are looking to replace that, a lot of that with solar and wind energy and other alternative forms, because there happens to be a larger mix of different forms of alternative energy that is renewable within the next decade. So I'm just saying, right? The facts are not with him. He's using outdated information, outdated facts, right? Now, as for the argument that, carbon is naturally occurring, so what's the problem? I mean, we breathe in oxygen, we exhale carbon dioxide, what's the problem? It's a naturally occurring gas. Yes, it is a naturally occurring gas. The problem is, with carbon, we're adding so much to the atmosphere so quickly that we are making it difficult for living people to be able to adapt to those changes. That's the problem. Now, if this were happening over larger geologic scales of time, right? Millions or hundreds of thousands of years, well, then humans or another species would be able to adapt more quickly. Because again, this has happened in the past, right? The problem isn't necessarily the carbon itself, it is the rate that we are releasing it into the atmosphere. And not only that, but other greenhouse gases like methane, for example. The problem is the rate that we are releasing them, and the rate of warming that is happening that will eventually create an effect that it's like I can't think of the word, but what happens is, for example, we keep releasing this carbon into the atmosphere that creates warming, that ends up melting the ice caps or melting the permafrost in these. Canada has got permafrost. You've also got Greenland that has a lot of permafrost. You have Antarctica, the ice sheets. They're sitting in a lot of carbon. You melt that, you release that carbon in the atmosphere, and it has an effect. So it just kind of adds to it. So that's very problematic, right? And so that ends up adding on and actually significantly increasing the rate of warming that's already happening. And it's going to have this runaway impact. And so that's a big, big issue, right? But this guy, he's saying, oh, no. Water's good for you, right? We like water. Water's good for crops. That's why we don't need levees. That's why we just would flood the area. But the problem is a flood will kill your crops and it will kill you. That's why people don't try to drink from fire hoses. Too much of something is dangerous, is problematic. You have to have a balance. So, and the reality here is we are out of balance. There is too much carbon being put into the atmosphere. And at the rate that we're going, we are going to increase warming beyond a point that we can control it. And that point is getting very, very close. So, and that means that we will not be able to adapt. Our society can't adapt. Our physiology will not be able to adapt. And more importantly, our food chain will also not be able to adapt and could collapse. And there was an article earlier today where there was the fact that global warming, overfishing, ocean pollution, and all that is causing the fish populations to decline massively, which could lead to the entire food chain in the ocean to collapse. That would be devastating for many, many people around the world, and of course the environment as well. So that's a huge problem, and something that we need to do something about if our society, and not just our society, but if our species and the species around the world are going to have a chance at survival into the future. Okay. All right. That's it. That's all I've got for the stories today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Let me check the fundraiser one more time. We're still at $275. So if you want to go to gofundme.com/TYTNationCamera, the link is in the description of this live stream. You can donate to our campaign to get better technology. Then I do have some super chats I want to read here. Romantic Warrior says, PayGo, the law must be followed unless the rule is in place. Not follow the law. That's how the GOP got the tax cuts through. You need the rule until the law is changed for progressive stuff. Okay, so that makes a little bit more sense as to why they're voting in favor of the rule. But if they're not going to go after the law, then okay. Again, I'm going to have to do more research into that because they make these things complicated on purpose so that you don't quite know what to be in favor of. But I know that as a general point, PayGo of any kind, whether it be the rule or the law, the entire purpose behind it is definitely a way to constrain progressives. And so Michael McAllister also adds in that he sent a clip with PayGo, on PayGo with Pocan on Twitter. Thank you guys for that. Appreciate that. All right. So that's it. Thank you guys. Oh, shoot. Here we go. Thank you all. We'll see you guys tomorrow for another show. Now it's TYT, so we'll see you guys later. Love you guys, and remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you tomorrow.